Welcome back to the channel for another review. This week we're going to be talking about the film True Story, which is actually based on, well, a true story. Starring Jonah Hill and James Franco as the main characters. This true story follows Michael Finkel, a reporter for the New York Times whose credibility is on the line. Discovering a killer takes on Finkel's identity in order to meet him before the trial to have his side of the story told, turning the investigation into a wait-and-see policy. Is Christian Longo's story written in stone, or is there more to this case than it's let out to be? Grab those snacks, sit back, relax, and let's take another look into True Story. Opening the film on a teddy bear being dropped into a suitcase with a little girl inside. Just before joining up with Jonah Hill's portrayal of Michael Finkel, interviewing this slave and villager for a whole whopping $10.
See this? You can have this, but only when we're done, okay?
Michael is an asshole though. This slave is trying to tell you his side of the story of the plantation field that he's forced to work at. Having to be hit with chains and shit, and Michael's just over here asking the hard-hitting questions.
Is it bad? Does he bleed?
No shit he bleeds. Let's hit you with a metal chain and see if you hurt and bleed.
It's okay. Tell him I'm from the New York Times.
I don't think they know what the New York Times is there, Michael, seeing as they need a translator to even speak with you. I just think they see the cash flow of Hamilton and are ready to answer questions like some fucked up version of Jeopardy. That's not stopping him from letting them know again once he asks to take pictures of their whipped backs for the paper.
This is me, Mike Finkel from the New York Times.
Christian Longo, portrayed by James Franco, is shown for the first time having some difficulty working this like electronic altar thing before some young blonde shows up to help him work it.
Ta-da.
Walking with her, explaining that he's a reporter visiting Mexico before introducing himself.
Mike Finkel, the New York Times.
And the first ounce of suspense. At the Times office, Michael is playing poker with his colleagues, being hassled about the validity of this story he was just interviewing for.
It'll need proofing.
No, it won't.
Hitting the streets to the main office before heading home since the main squeezes want to speak with him. Something in the air smells though. I've worked for enough places and corporations to know if you walk in and somebody says,
None of it should be a problem. 15 minutes?
usually there's one hell of a problem. Our boy Michael here didn't do the checks though, and people aren't too happy to see that he wrote about the wrong person in his story.
It might not be him.
But now he's sitting here just trying to make up excuses.
This article was about saving young people's lives. I came back with a plan for that. You said write it up.
I said write it up, not make it up.
She isn't wrong though, stating that this bad article can do terrible things for the charity's donations, but the fact that she's screaming at him about it makes it 100 times funnier when the head honcho says,
That's enough, Karen.
because I was thinking the same thing. Ultimately losing his job and possibly future career despite what this guy says.
You have a great future ahead of you, Mike.
I don't know about that, friend. If this dude didn't even fact check for the New York Times, I highly doubt any other possible employer is going to look at that and be like, yeah, we want this guy on our team. Getting back home to Montana, informing his wife about his termination, she tries the game plan on her end to make sure that this blow isn't such a heavy hitter.
I can ask the university for a raise or take on some high school teaching.
Seeing Michael trying to schmooze with old colleagues in order to secure a new job with no luck.
Right, but none of my other work has any suspicions. You know, how long have we known each other? Don't make me beg here.
Until the phone rings the next morning, answering to hear a reporter on the other end.
Hi, my name is Pat Fredo. I'm a reporter with the Oregonian.
To discover that Christian used Michael's name when apprehended. Meeting up with Randy from My Name is Earl.
My name is Randy.
Discussing the details of Christian's crimes and arrests. Finding out where he's being held until his trial date, which is kind of confusing. They play it off like they're old friends where Randy finds like behind the scenes information for him, but then he says,
I wanted to meet you as much as you me. I love your writing.
Then gives zero explanation on how they got in touch. It might just be a pet peeve of mine, but I personally hate when films and TV shows introduce new characters without any backgrounds or information on them. Writing a note to Christian wondering why he would use his names out of anybody else's in the world before flashing to their first meeting together.
Call me Chris.
Nice to meet you, Chris.
They do an excellent job, or at least Franco does a wonderful job acting in this film. From the first impression, you can tell that something's a little off about him. Calculating every move and word that Michael says in order to come up with a response that he thinks Michael would like to hear.
Picked up the Times and you thought the name sounded funny? Or...
No, I followed your whole career.
What?
I probably read everything you've done. I guess I felt like I knew you.
Using this time to more or less figure out Michael, dodging most of his questions in order to ask his own and take control of the interview.
I know I'm very valuable to people like you. Most journalists, they don't want to take the time to find out the truth about what really happened.
The truth always matters.
It always seems to matter to you.
Time's up for today's interview, but not before Chris makes Michael promise him 2 things if this is going to continue.
I need your word that you will not tell anyone what I tell you until after the trial.
What's the second thing?
I want you to teach me to write.
Catching back up with Jill at the university library, Michael is super excited about the story, telling her all about it at first getting shit on,
You might not even hear from him again.
before asking the real question,
Can you trust him?
making Michael super upset.
Don't do that.
But then saves it with,
Don't you see this as a second chance?
Chris sends this massive package to Michael, holding what seems to be some sort of like self-biography. Flashing between the two as Michael reads the yellow pages and Chris's broken narration of the contents is read in the background. Leaving for a couple days for more interviews with Chris while simultaneously learning about the murders, finding outlets to sell the story to. Jill does this like sly little test to make sure Michael's not going to make the same mistake twice.
What was her name?
Mary Jane, look, I know what I'm doing, okay?
We begin to get hit with a little bit of reasonable doubt of Chris's guiltiness. There's just a lot that isn't making sense to Michael.
Why drive 15 miles to dump bodies in the edge of the next town? Don't you find that odd?
Just as we learn that Chris is going to try and plead innocent to the whole affair. Lady Majin and I both said this when first watching, but Michael's kind of an asshole. Remember the 2 rules that Chris had for Michael?
I need your word that you will not tell anyone what I tell you until after the trial.
He's literally breaking one of the rules right now by telling Randy he wants to plead innocent. Randy's talking about how maybe Chris doesn't deserve to have his side of the story told with all of the terrible things he's being accused of, but Michael stops him and says,
Everybody deserves to have their story heard.
Next visit is here. Michael's explaining to Chris that there's absolutely no way he'd be able to write an article about this.
It's not an article I can write. But it could be a book.
Beginning an exercise in a trade style where Michael will give Christian a note. In return, Chris will answer one of Michael's questions. Teaching him the difficulties of interpreting a double negative, wanting to hear about the girl that he hooked up with in Mexico.
I don't know.
Great answer there, Chris, but to be fair, do any of us know why we hook up with anybody?
I was grieving so much.
But you slept with her on the first night.
Alright, there's no misinterpreting that. Michael asks him another question immediately after.
Did you do what you're accused of doing?
Alright, damn Michael. You didn't even let him ask another writing question and you just dive right into the hard-hitting questions. Not even a workup to it?
I can't tell you what really happened.
Inching us ever closer off of our seats when asking why flee to Mexico if he was innocent?
Sometimes you have to accept looking one way in order to protect something more important.
Michael's not giving in to that though.
Why did you kill them?
I didn't kill them.
See, that's what I'm talking about. Give that suspense. They were starting to lose me a little bit since we're about halfway through the film now, but then they dropped this bomb on us. On his way for another meeting, Michael is on the phone with a major publishing company trying to explain how this could be a book instead of an article.
It's a book. It is a book.
Wondering it will end up like another African child story. They aren't so sure, but Michael gives them the peace of mind that they're looking for.
Of course. And you have nothing to worry about.
Having another meeting with Longo, learning more about the path that he took in order to get him to where he is today. How we hear most good people gone wrong stories start. Beginning with losing his job, having to resort to petty theft so his kids can have toys on Christmas.
That says more about you than anything. Chris, it's not easy to relate to someone who is accused of 4 murders. But everyone understands a child needing a toy.
We're about midway through the film now. Joining back up with Jill at the house, going over some notes with Michael. But instead he breaks out his African child story notepad to see that their note-taking is eerily similar. That is super weird. In the back of my mind, I have to keep wondering to myself if Michael is the real killer of Christian's family. Between him specifically using his name in order to meet him, then seeing these notes, it really has to make you think. Especially his reply when Jane asks,
"You think he's innocent, don't you?"
I don't presume anything anymore.
I know they're talking about his fuck up from the African child story, but with the current mood they're setting, it's kind of like a little wink of, yeah, he's innocent because I did it. Back at the prison, we're joining them for another little writing exercise, which I have to say, if you're having trouble writing or wanting to be a better writer, you will learn subtle things from these teaching lessons.
We're gonna say a word, and then we just write the first thing that comes to our mind. Don't even think about it.
I personally feel like I've gotten a little bit better at writing since I've watched this, but then Christian's got to make it all weird.
For love, I wrote Mike and Jill.
What?
This would be my same exact reaction. Like, yes, I love Lady Maj, but to have him write that is just so unsettling.
I thought you were writing about her.
I would have thought you would have written MJ.
I couldn't.
Even more once given the explanation. Coming to the final word of the day, lies, which Chris isn't too happy about.
Lies.
But this was more of a manipulation tactic out of Michael to get more information out of him. But the main problem is you can't manipulate a professional manipulator.
I'm a liar. You stole my identity.
Sorry.
The relationship that they have is kind of beautiful, even though Chris may be a crazed psychopath.
Thanks, Mike.
Leaving for the day, calling HarperCollins to give them the title of the book.
True story, I think.
He said it! He said it! The next couple of minutes are just a montage of Jill, Michael, and Chris doing their own things with instrumentals behind it. I think they just needed to fill some of the runtime, honestly. Now here's where we start to see some of Chris's manipulation tactics start to unfold. Once Michael decides that they should dedicate the book to a prison guard that nicknamed him Shortstop, as a joke for his last name Longo, but that's besides the point.
We'll give him the dedication.
Dedicate?
When a writer puts in a secret message for someone special, like a private joke.
Like, come on, Chris. I know you're sitting here having Michael trying to teach you how to be a better writer, but there is absolutely no way that you didn't know what the word dedicate means. Getting a $200,000 advance for the book. Yep, that's right, something most of us wouldn't see unless we worked 4 years of retail. Jill decides to ask him,
Did he do it?
I don't know.
shouldn't you figure that out before you go through with this $250,000 advance on a book? The final day of meetings before the trial is here between Michael and Chris. Chris wants to plead guilty since people are going to think what they want to think. Mike doesn't like that answer too much though, so he decides to tell Chris about his screw up at the Times.
When I wrote that Africa story, I didn't mix up my notes. I didn't combine the characters by accident. I knew what I was doing.
I don't know if he truly thinks Chris is covering for someone or just doesn't want his reputation torn again.
If you're covering for someone, if you're lying for them, it will eat away.
Judgment Day is here. Chris pleading guilty to 2 of the crimes that he's accused of, even taking the judge back. Mike racing to go see Chris is being reamed out by his boss.
Fuck!
Asking Chris the real question once he arrives to his cell.
What are you doing? Who pleads guilty to 2 murders and innocent to 2 others?
Mike's sitting here freaking out on Chris, but my favorite part about this is when Mike says,
I know better than to blindly trust my sources. If anybody on Earth knows that, it's me.
but obviously not, as we've seen it twice already. Chris whips out his manipulation tactics 101.
You're a good friend, and I owe you so much.
Getting stopped by an investigator by the ODJ, Greg Ganley, wanting Michael to give up any tapes or notes from their meetings.
I can't do that. I promised Chris I would.
Thinking that Chris is trying to confuse the jury as some part of bigger game, Mike isn't about it. Calling Mike's home, Jill answers to take a message, just as Chris starts to try and implant his brain seed into her.
It's really nice to talk to you, Jill.
You know, Mike's such a sweet guy, and he's been a real friend to me, and he really loves you.
You know, even if he seems like he doesn't want to let it out. It must be hard for you to have him so preoccupied like that.
I don't mean to make you uncomfortable. I just hope that we can be friends too.
The final day of court is here with Chris facing the death penalty. There's nothing too crazy going on here other than finding out that Chris used to work for
Starbucks.
It's not until the manager says that Chris came in the day after the murders looking all disheveled, stating
Said his wife had left him for another man, a reporter.
This is such a crazy turn to take so late in the film that it blew me off the couch. You're telling me that he found out his wife was having an affair with a reporter, murdered his family, and then stole the reporter's name in order to meet that reporter and have his side of the story told? I don't know, something just smells fishy here. While all this is happening, Jill is at home looking at the shrine of letters that Chris has sent Michael, just as we hear the gruesome details of the murder in the background.
Zachary and Sadie had Play-Doh under their fingernails.
I don't want to show too much of this because it's just upsetting. Court is adjourned, and on his way out, Michael stops to give his condolences to one of the families, and she just snaps out on him, but rightfully so.
This must be an incredibly difficult day for your family.
Why are you talking to me?
He picked me.
He didn't pick you. He used you.
Day 3 of the trial starts as Jill shows up to watch it all go down, hearing the beginning of Chris's heinous crimes. Telling the story about when he got home from work, she was distraught after finding the kids dead that he just
Picked her up by her throat.
This explanation of the night goes on for a while with a lot of detail that I just realistically cannot provide in this video, so please go support the official release. Towards the end of his testimony, the judge asks him,
"Why do you think she would do this? Why not just take the kids and leave?"
To which we get true insight into the sick mind of Chris.
Maybe she thought she could make something good out of two things that were bad, like a double negative.
Getting a change of heart afterwards, Michael tries selling out Chris to Greg, but Greg doesn't give two shits about that anymore.
But you can put that away. It's done.
It could have influenced the jury.
Completely shitting all over Mike.
But in the end, you wouldn't have made a very good witness. You've been through a sort of trial of your own recently. The verdict was you're a liar.
Jill visiting Chris at the prison for the first time becomes such a creepy scene.
I haven't seen a woman in so long.
She starts playing opera music, giving Chris a little history lesson on the song, giving more credibility to my initial theory of the lover story being true and Michael being the reporter.
His wife had a lover, so he tracked them down with a hunting knife. He stabbed her many, many times, all over her body.
Why do they keep bringing up cheating with a reporter if it's not Michael? She continues with this monologue for a while, finishing it by stating,
You see, Mike wants to try and understand you, but I don't want to understand you at all.
Verdict day is here with Chris being found
Guilty, Your Honor.
I find it hysterical, though, that during his ruling, the judge states,
You must have realized no one would believe you.
I think he did find someone who believed him, though. So much so that he fought to have his story told for a $250,000 advance. I know this isn't too relevant to the story, but the next scene shows Chris writing a letter to Michael, and the way that he writes the M in Mike just stresses me out. Deciding to visit Chris on death row.
You look good. I've had 2 marriage proposals.
Hoping he's ready to tell the truth, Chris finally admits that he did kill his wife before blacking out and killing the kids.
It's just a blank. The first thing I remember is waking up in the airport.
You blacked out?
Then he decides to trick Chris by saying he could have used that by like a temporary insanity sort of thing, and as soon as Chris starts saying that he's got a new lawyer to file an appeal, Mike just snaps.
No, it's not. Killed them, you sick fuck. Killed all of them.
Chris hits him with a reality check, though.
How's the book, Mike? You didn't have to finish it, but you did. I'm the most important thing that ever happened to you.
So much so that I kind of almost feel bad for Mike because he knows it's true.
From now on, you'll just be the guy who talked to the guy who killed his family.
Other than the African child story, which was redacted, this book and eventual movie are going to be the only thing that really people associate your name with. Ending our story with Michael reading his book on a tour, getting asked some of the dumbest questions.
Do you think he'll kill again, like in prison, maybe?
Bruh. I doubt it, he's locked up.
Seeing the lifelong mark that associating yourself with a narcissistic psychopath will get you.
Do you ever regret contacting him?
What do you mean?
Christian Longo has lost his liberty. I was just wondering what you might have lost as well.
That's going to do it for this review of the film True Story. This was one film that actually took me by surprise. I always have a hard time getting into true crime films and shows, but the pace of the storytelling in this really kept you on the edge of your seat. Don't get me wrong, there are some parts that feel like it's dragging, but then it just picks right back up again. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and notifications on, that way you know each time a new video is uploaded. Check out the links in the description for more of me across all your favorite social media platforms. And until next time, I love you all. Thank you for watching. I'll see you later. Conquest. To help give Mark the push he needs in order to get the people of Earth to agree to join the Viltrum Empire. Make sure you have your snacks ready, sit back, relax, and let's jump right in.